These media sell stoicism as a literal statue. They sell you silence like it's salvation. TikTok gurus preaching lone wolf discipline while filming from rented apartments and sponsored microphones. Fake sigmas, fake zetas. Same script, different filters. They tell you to isolate, you live alone, independent, kill emotions. To hate leadership, to hate money. But here's the truth. Stoicism was never about becoming numb. It's a sword, not a sedative. Real Stoics didn't hide from the world. They stood in it, blade steady, emotion mastered, not murdered. The modern imitation preaches detachment as escape. The real thing? Detachment as control. You don't isolate to disappear. You isolate to forge. To hear your own mind without the echo of algorithms. You walk alone not because you hate people, but because clarity is loud when you're surrounded by noise. So when they tell you to be the lone wolf, ask yourself, are you hunting or are you hiding? Let's begin the journey. Chapter 1. You were never meant to feel nothing. Have you noticed how the world keeps selling you silence as strength? Walk into any corner of the internet where men gather to self-help, and you'll find the same sermon preached 1,000 different ways. Be cold, be unshakable, feel nothing. They call it stoicism, but it's just emotional death dressed up as discipline. Here's what they won't tell you. The philosophy they're butchering was never about becoming stone. The ancient practitioners, the ones who actually lived this way, they didn't chase numbness. Seneca trembled. Marcus Aurelius grieved. Epictetus felt pain like any man with flesh and bone. They just refused to let those sensations dictate their direction. Studies on emotional suppression, conducted by Gross and Levinson back in 1993, showed something most people ignore. When you push down what you feel, your body keeps the receipt. Heart rate climbs. Blood pressure spikes. The thing you're hiding doesn't disappear. It multiplies in the dark. And worse, research from Chapman and colleagues in 2013 found that men who bought into this toxic version of toughness, the kind that mistakes silence for strength, they reported higher rates of loneliness, depression, and relational collapse. You were never supposed to become a statue. You were supposed to become a force that feels everything but bends to nothing. The Zeta doesn't suppress. He sharpens his awareness until emotion becomes information, not instruction. When fear arrives, he doesn't pretend it's not there. He looks at it, asks what it's protecting, and decides whether that protection still serves him. This isn't about killing what makes you human. It's about refusing to let chaos choose your next move. Chapter 2. The illusion they sold you control over. Do you remember the last time you thought you had it all figured out? Most people spend their entire lives building castles on quicksand, then wonder why they're drowning when the ground shifts. They map out careers, relationships, retirements. They convince themselves that if they just work hard enough, plan smart enough, control tight enough, the universe will honor their blueprint. But nature doesn't negotiate. Markets collapse overnight. Bodies break without warning. People you die for walk away on a Tuesday afternoon. The Stoics understood something most people never grasp. Control is the most expensive illusion you'll ever buy. Epictetus split the world into two territories. Things within your power and things beyond it. And he was ruthless about where that line fell. Your thoughts, your responses, your principles. Yours. Everything else, including the outcome of your best efforts, not yours. This isn't pessimism. It's precision. When you stop pretending you can dictate terms to reality, something shifts. You stop bleeding energy into fights you were never meant to win. You stop resenting the storm for being a storm. A study by Langer and Rodin in 1976 explored perceived control in nursing home residents. Those given autonomy over small choices, plant care, movie nights, showed better health and lower mortality rates. But here's the part they don't emphasize enough. The participants who were given control over things genuinely within their reach thrived. Those promised control over outcomes they couldn't actually influence reported higher anxiety when reality inevitably disappointed them. For you, this means something sharper. You don't waste time trying to make people love you, markets stabilize, or genetics rewrite themselves. You focus on the only territory you actually govern, the space between stimulus and response. That's where you build your empire. Not in the world, but in how you move through it. Chapter 3. Why your suffering isn't what you think it is. What if the pain isn't the problem? Most people treat suffering like a malfunction, something that shouldn't be happening, a glitch in the program of their perfect life. They fight it, medicate it, scroll past it, do anything to make it stop. But suffering doesn't ask for permission. It arrives when your preferences collide with reality. and reality doesn't care what you wanted. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, writing in his private journals, said something that cuts through the noise. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This wasn't poetry for him. This was survival doctrine. He watched plagues ravage cities, wars drain empires, betrayals come from his own inner circle. And still, he chose to see obstacles not as interruptions but as the actual curriculum. Research by Siri and colleagues in 2010 tracked lifetime adversity and its effects on mental health. They discovered something the comfort seekers hate hearing. People with zero trauma history actually showed worse outcomes than those with moderate adversity. No hardship meant no resilience framework, no calluses on the psyche. But here's the sharper edge. Those with overwhelming trauma also struggled. The sweet spot existed in the middle, where suffering was substantial but not annihilating. For you, this translates directly. Every rejection is teaching you detachment. Every failure is refining your strategy. Every loss is stripping away what was never meant to last. You don't run from the fire, you let it burn away everything that isn't essential. The Zeta doesn't ask why this is happening. He asks what this is shaping him into. Suffering isn't the enemy. Meaningless suffering is. And you decide what it means. Chapter 4. The distance between you and your thoughts. How often do you believe everything your mind tells you? Your brain is a survival machine, not a truth seeker. It evolved to keep you alive in environments where hesitation meant death. So it scans for threats constantly, interprets ambiguity as danger, replays worst-case scenarios on loop. That voice in your head telling you you're not enough, that everyone's judging you, that this situation is catastrophic. It's just doing its job. But its job isn't accuracy. It's alarm. Epictetus gave us the framework centuries before modern psychology caught up. We are disturbed not by events, but by our views of them. A thought is just an impression, not reality itself. This distinction separates those who get swallowed by their mental noise from those who use it as data. Cognitive distancing, what psychologists now call it, is the practice of observing your thoughts without obeying them. Wegner and colleagues demonstrated this through decades of research on thought suppression, publishing key findings in 1987. They called it the rebound effect. When people tried to suppress a thought, "Don't think about white bears," that exact thought invaded their consciousness more frequently and intensely. The mind doesn't respond well to denial. It responds to acknowledgement without attachment. For you, this becomes operational. Your boss criticizes your work. Immediate thought, "I'm failing, I'm getting fired, I'm worthless." That's the alarm system activating. But you pause. You create space. You recognize that this thought is one interpretation among infinite possibilities. Maybe the criticism is valid feedback. Maybe it reveals where you need to sharpen your skills. Maybe your boss sees potential and wants to push you harder. The event is neutral. Your lens colors it, and you control the lens, not the event. The Zeta instinctively knows this. Emotion is information, not instruction. Chapter 5. Why weakness pretends to be strength. Have you ever noticed how isolation masquerades as independence? There's a particular breed of man who confuses self-reliance with self-imprisonment. He refuses help, rejects vulnerability, builds walls so high he can't see out anymore. And he calls it strength. They call themselves Sigma, Zeta, or Omega. But it's just fear wearing a mask. True independence isn't about needing no one. It's about not being controlled by your need. The modern masculinity gurus sell this fantasy hard. Don't depend on anyone. Don't open up. Handle everything alone. They do it for views. Because people love when they affirm them that living alone is okay. But research tells a different story. The Harvard study of adult development, spanning over 80 years and tracked by Waldinger and Schultz, found one consistent predictor of health, happiness, and longevity: quality relationships. Not wealth. Not fame. Not rugged individualism. Connection. The men who isolated themselves, who wore stoicism like armor, they died earlier, suffered more, and lived smaller lives. Seneca understood this paradox deeply. He wrote that the wise man is self-sufficient, not because he wishes to be without friends, but because he knows how to be without them if necessary. The distinction is surgical. You develop the capacity to stand alone so that when you choose to stand with others, it's from abundance, not desperation. You're not clinging. You're collaborating. For you, this cuts through the noise immediately. Asking for help isn't weakness when it accelerates your mission. Sharing your struggle isn't softness when it deepens your bonds. The Zeta doesn't confuse emotional suppression with emotional discipline. He speaks when silence serves no one, including himself. He knows that connection is a force multiplier, not a crutch. The man who refuses all support isn't strong. He's just scared of being seen. And fear disguised as principle is still just fear. We're halfway in it. Hope you're enjoying this video. Join the tribe with less than $1 and share your opinion about it. I will read each comment and pin the most inspiring one. Thanks for watching. Chapter 6. The gratitude no one wants to practice. What if you stopped fighting what already happened? People love the idea of gratitude until it requires them to be grateful for the hard things. They'll thank the universe for promotions, relationships, sunny days. But losing the job, the betrayal, the diagnosis, those get filed under injustice. And they spend years demanding refunds from reality. But nature doesn't apologize. It doesn't explain itself. It just moves. Amor fati. Love of fate. It sounds poetic until you realize what it's actually asking. Nietzsche framed it as the ultimate affirmation. Not just accepting what happens, but wanting it to have happened exactly as it did. Not because you're delusional, but because resistance to the past is the most pointless expenditure of energy that exists. You can't edit history. You can only weaponize it. This isn't toxic positivity. This is strategic reorientation. Research by Emmons and McCullough in 2003 on gratitude interventions showed participants who kept gratitude journals reported higher well-being, better sleep, and increased prosocial behavior. But the studies focused on obvious blessings. The deeper practice, the one most people avoid, involves finding utility in catastrophe. Gratitude for hardship isn't about pretending pain doesn't hurt. It's about refusing to let pain be the final word on what that experience means. For you, this becomes doctrine. The injury that ended your athletic career taught you adaptability. The partner who left forced you to confront codependency. The business that failed revealed which skills you were outsourcing instead of mastering. Every collapse carries intelligence if you're willing to extract it. The Zeta doesn't romanticize suffering, but he also doesn't waste it. He mines every setback for the lesson embedded in it, then moves with that knowledge sharpened. You're not pretending the wound didn't happen. You're deciding what scar it leaves behind. Chapter 7. Why your preferences are keeping you weak. How much of your misery is just disappointed entitlement? Most people walk through life carrying a script they never wrote. This is how things should unfold. This is what I deserve. This is the timeline I'm owed. And when reality deviates even slightly, they crumble. They rage. They spiral. But here's the edge they're missing. Your preferences are not cosmic law. They're just habits of wanting dressed up as righteousness. The universe doesn't owe you fairness. It doesn't owe you comfort. It doesn't even owe you tomorrow. Every breath is borrowed time. Every moment is a statistical miracle wrapped in flesh that will eventually stop working. And yet people act shocked when things don't bend to their vision. Marcus Aurelius sat on the throne of an empire and still reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. Research by Lyabomirsky and colleagues in 2005 examined hedonic adaptation, the phenomenon where people return to baseline happiness regardless of positive or negative life events. Lottery winners and accident victims, after initial spikes or drops, eventually settled back to similar satisfaction levels. The takeaway most miss is this: external circumstances have far less control over your state than you've been conditioned to believe. What controls you is the gap between expectation and reality. Narrow that gap and you gain power. For you, this means ruthless honesty about what you're entitled to. Nothing. You're entitled to nothing. But you're also capable of everything within your sphere of control. The Zeta doesn't whine when the world doesn't cooperate. He recalibrates. He finds another route without mourning the road that closed. Your preferences are just suggestions you're making to chaos. And chaos doesn't take suggestions. So either you adapt your expectations to what is, or you suffer permanently in the fiction of what should be. Chapter 8. The practice that separates philosophers from posers. When was the last time you actually sat with yourself? Everyone talks about mindfulness like it's some mystical state you achieve after years on a cushion surrounded by incense. But it's not transcendence. It's training. It's the daily practice of watching your mind throw tantrums and not joining the performance. Most people never develop this skill because they mistake thinking about thinking for actually observing thought. They're drowning in mental noise, convinced they're the noise itself. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can listen twice as much as we speak. But he wasn't just talking about external conversation. He meant internal dialogue too. Most people never listen to themselves. They just react to the loudest voice in their head without questioning where it's coming from or whether it's telling the truth. Neuroscience backs this up with precision. Research by Tang and colleagues in 2015 showed that mindfulness meditation physically alters brain structure, increasing gray matter density in regions associated with self-awareness and emotional regulation while decreasing activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. But here's what the wellness industry won't emphasize. This isn't about feeling peaceful. It's about building the architecture to handle chaos without being consumed by it. For you, this isn't optional. It's operational necessity. The Zeta practices cognitive separation daily, not through elaborate rituals, but through micro moments. Someone cuts you off in traffic. That spike of rage, you feel it, you name it, you let it pass without acting on it. You forget your gym clothes. That flash of frustration, acknowledged, observed, released. These aren't inconveniences. They're repetitions. Every moment of chaos is a chance to strengthen your ability to pause between impulse and action. You're not meditating to escape reality. You're sharpening your edge inside it. Chapter 9. When virtue becomes your only currency. What happens when everything you built can be taken from you tomorrow? Strip away the money, the status, the body, the relationships. What's left? For most people, the answer is terrifying: nothing. One thing you need to chase is power. Other things like money, status, body, relationships follow. People built their entire identity on externals, on things that decay, disappear, or get redistributed by forces they can't control. And when those things vanish, they collapse. But the Stoics knew something that modern self-help forgot. The only wealth that can't be stolen is character. Virtue for the Stoics wasn't about being nice or polite. It was about excellence of being. Courage when it costs you. Wisdom when ignorance is easier. Justice when unfairness benefits you. Temperance when excess is available. These aren't moral decorations. They're survival tools. They're the foundation that holds when everything else crumbles. Cato the Younger chose death over compromising his principles under Caesar's rule. Not because he was suicidal, but because a life without integrity wasn't worth the breath it took to live it. Research by Peterson and Seligman in their work on character strengths and virtues identified core traits across cultures and eras that predicted well-being, resilience, and life satisfaction. But they also found something darker. People who pursued external validation, wealth, fame, social approval, reported lower life satisfaction and higher psychological distress than those oriented toward intrinsic values like personal growth, relationships, and community contribution. For you, this recalibrates everything. Your worth isn't measured by your bank account, your physique, or how many people know your name. It's measured by what you do when no one's watching. It's tested when doing the right thing costs you something. The Zeta builds his fortress internally. His principles aren't negotiable based on convenience. He operates from a code that exists independent of outcome. Win or lose, succeed or fail, he remains intact because his value system isn't hostage to circumstances. They can take everything from you except who you chose to be in the taking. Chapter 10. You don't arrive, you sharpen inside it. What if mastery isn't a destination? The modern world sells completion. Finish this course, achieve this goal, reach this level, and then you'll have arrived. But neither Stoicism nor life work like that. There's no graduation ceremony. No moment where you become perfectly rational, eternally calm, immune to suffering. That's the fantasy version they're selling you. The real practice is grittier, harder, and never-ending. Epictetus was sold into slavery as a child, crippled by his master, and still became one of history's most influential philosophers. But even he never claimed to be the perfect sage. The sage, in Stoic philosophy, was almost mythical, a theoretical ideal that maybe one or two humans in history approximated. Zeno himself said the sage is as rare as the Ethiopian phoenix. Not because the philosophy doesn't work, but because perfection isn't the point. Progress is. Research on deliberate practice by Erickson and colleagues spanning decades showed that elite performers in any domain, music, sports, chess, share one trait. They never stop identifying weaknesses and drilling them. The moment someone believes they've mastered something, their growth curve flatlines. Mastery isn't a state, it's a trajectory, and it requires perpetual confrontation with inadequacy. For you, this means something radical. You're never done. Every day you wake up, you're starting again. The anger you conquered yesterday will test you today in a different form. The discipline you built will face new temptations. The clarity you earned will cloud under new pressures. And that's not failure. That's the work. The Zeta doesn't chase arrival. He chases refinement. Every setback is another edge to sharpen. Every challenge is another rep. You don't transcend your humanity. You optimize within it. This philosophy doesn't promise you peace. It promises you a sword. And it asks one question: what will you destroy with it? Bonus chapter: Power without audience. Here's the question: if no one saw you win, would you still call it victory? Be honest. Would you still grind if there was no applause, no eyes, no dopamine hit from the feed? That's where most collapse. They chase recognition, not reality. They mistake visibility for value, applause for achievement, followers for force. But Zetas? They operate in shadow. They don't need witnesses to validate their worth. Their power is private, their motives invisible. When they move, it's not performance, it's precision. When they build, it's not for likes, it's for leverage. You could say it's lonely, but it's not. It's clean. Because the Zeta's world isn't a stage, it's a lab. Every decision is data, every failure a feedback. They master invisibility because influence doesn't come from being seen, it comes from being unavoidable. When you're that effective, the world adjusts around your gravity whether it knows your name or not. Most people spend their lives screaming for attention, burning bright and short. The Zeta learns to hum quietly at a higher voltage. His silence intimidates more than another man's speech. His results are his signal. And the beautiful irony? When you stop craving the crowd, the world starts leaning in to listen. Thanks for watching.